Battle Axe Theater. That's a good name.
Battle Axe, man. He brought the preach.
Video.
Battle Axe Theater.
Death from Battle Axe. I don't know if you guys have seen, he just rants, and it's awesome. And he just starts screaming and yelling. I need to have a beer with that guy.
You're watching Battle Axe Theater. That means drinking, vulgar language, vaping, and occasionally over-the-top nudity. Viewer discretion is advised.
Oh, I forgot to hit a button. Hold on, guys. There we go. Okay, we'll edit that out. All right. What is up, guys? We are Battle Axe Theater. I'm Punkshoe. I'm here with my boy Def.
Def.
And we've got a special guest with us here today, Tim Anderson from Saga of Lucimia. He is, he holds a lot of hats there, but he's like the creative everything over there.
Everybody here has a lot of hats, but yeah.
All right, so, man, I feel rusty. Do you feel rusty, Def?
Yeah, well, we've been on a bit of a break, so,
Yeah, you guys were, one of you was moving. Who was moving?
that was me.
Def was moving.
I guess are we doing rear view this week?
Let's go ahead and knock that out real quick. I think yours is really the most important thing because we can kind of see it visually. So why don't you tell us...
got a studio, kind of. It's not finished, but, working on it. So, yeah, there'll be a video about that Friday if everything goes well. And it'll just be kind of doing the whole process and, just showing all that and going in details and kind of what our plans are when we come back from our break. And, that's about it. I've just been moving and unpacking and all that good stuff.
So more of the same shit that we've been hearing about for the last 3 weeks.
Pretty much, man. Moving is a pain in the ass, and I hate it.
I gotta say that green screen wall, the paint it definitely looks a lot better than that cloth.
That wrinkled sheet that I used to, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. As far as me, in this past week, I don't know, we bought a free company. Wait, let's rewind that. So we've been playing Final Fantasy 14. And we founded the free company because Battle Axe, the gaming community, finally decided to kind of settle down with the game. And then we invested in a free company house. It's small, but it's our house. So there's that.
I didn't know they had housing in Final Fantasy.
Yeah,
I haven't played in a while.
They're little segregated zones. They're like each like main city has like a separate zone, and there's different instances of that zone. So there's plots that you can buy. So
it's kind of like Lord of the Rings online, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, similar. Mm-hmm. So we got that. Been playing a little bit of Final Fantasy, testing some waters, doing some like YouTube algorithm and like feature testing, like in terms of like some things that we want to put in here with another channel that I've got out there. I'm not going to tell you guys what that other channel is. If you find it cool, if you don't, that's still cool too, because I just want to see what kind of natural growth that has with certain like shorter format videos that have different types of outros and intros, and looking at audience retention and things like that. So that's what I've been up to. I don't know if Tim wants to tell us what he's been up to.
What you been doing this week, man?
Hang on, what is today? Today's Monday? Today's Tuesday. Man, I don't know what day it is. Monday. Just lots of work. Last week was Volume 2 draft stuff. I'm working with Mikhail on artwork. It's all game-related stuff. And then we had a big forest fire here in Mexico City, so it's been lots of smoke and fun stuff with that. But yeah, mostly just game-related work stuff. And
Gotcha.
My YouTube, that indie game dev diary thingy I'm working on.
Yeah, and if you guys aren't aware, Saga of Lucimia has its YouTube channel, but Tim has a YouTube channel as well. If you look him up on Renfail, you'll find his YouTube channel, and he started like this vlog, or this kind of like sit down, tell you what it's like to be an indie game dev, and He spent an hour talking about it.
Well, the first episode went way long because I was like, I'm gonna try to do these in 30 minutes, but then I had to do the intro. Then I actually did a live version, episode 2, with a few people who were watching, and that went like an hour and 20 minutes. And I said I can't do that for these episodes, so I'm trying to keep them down to 30 minutes. But that channel, I originally started that last year just as a place for me to stick up. Like I was playing like Star Wars: The Old Republic, EverQuest 1 on the
Okay.
1999 server, just like old retro games that I like to play. Like I did like Betrayal at Krondor, and I think maybe even like Baldur's Gate or something. I did like 5 or 6 games over the course of the summer.
Hold up, I got a Betrayal at. I think this is a game that I was looking for.
It's on GOG for like $5 or something.
Oh my god, dude, I love you because I've been sitting here for months trying to remember what this game was called.
The cover art on that was the coolest ever, with a big bastard sword and just.
Yes.
I loved the Raymond Feist novels. So when that game came out when I was a teenager, it was like, this is like the best RPG game that's ever existed outside of like Pool of Radiance and stuff. And then I never played it again. And then one day I was on GOG like last year, and it was on sale for like $4 or $5. I was like, I'm totally buying that. Because even though the graphics are shit by today's standards, it's still the story. Like that game actually has a novel length, storyline within it. And if you love good storytelling and role playing, it's so much fun to play. It's a great game.
Fun, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff that I started that channel for, was just me to stick these random videos. I think recently I'm doing Quest for Glory 4, and what was the other one I was playing recently? I'm still playing right now.
Well, you were playing several Quests for Glory.
Oh, yeah. Well, I did 3 and I didn't record it. Now I'm doing
Okay.
4, and I'm recording some of those sessions. Oh, and I'm also playing Knights of the Old Republic 1 right now.
Right.
So
yeah. Okay.
I do those 2, 3, maybe 4 times a week when I have like little 30 minutes here and there. But yeah, and then I started the diary series just as kind of an experiment.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I found it very entertaining and very informative.
It's
the
nuts
longer
and
format.
bolts. Yeah, it's nuts and bolts. What it is. So it's not. We're not sharing any stuff from our game. I'm not showing that kind of stuff off. But it's just, here's how we did what we did. Here's some things that we've learned. Here's some stuff that I know. Maybe this can. And some of it's universal. Some of it's only focused on game development. But like when I get into the marketing stuff, it'll be universal for lots of different projects.
Right.
It was really cool to get like an inside look of all the things you go through and all the things you need to plan out for, and I really enjoyed those videos. That was pretty cool.
Real quick before we continue, we've got a lot of
Sure.
people popping up in chat. I just want to give a shout out to everybody. Welcome to the stream tonight. Again, if you missed it, we're here with Tim Anderson. He is a creative director over at Saga of Lucimia. We're talking just a little bit about his personal YouTube channel, where he's going to be laying out some discussion pieces about what it's like to be an indie game dev. And he's got a lot of other experiences too that he talks about. So definitely check that out. Be sure to subscribe to that stuff because it's very informative if you're looking for like nuts and bolts, like you said, like numbers and real like theory behind things. So check that out. Fell's in here. What's up, Fell? We got Minus. Chris has been in here since we got started. Scribbles, welcome. Who else do we have here? Micah and Roxy are here too. Thanks everybody for joining us. If I missed you, sorry. Just trying to catch up a little bit here. If you have questions throughout the stream on particular topics, as always, there is a slight delay between the broadcast, our discussion. But feel
Robert,
free
we see you, Robert. Shout out to Robert.
What's up, Robert? But yeah, feel free to leave your questions in the chat, and we'll try to catch up periodically to have Tim answer any questions that you have for him or any questions that you have for us. We'll get to those. So this stream is primarily we're going to give the floor to Tim. I want him to really be able to talk about some. He tells me it's a mistake, and people that are in the development community of Saga tell me that's a mistake too because Tim likes to talk. But I like to listen sometimes, occasionally, every once in a while. So I'm gonna have Tim, like what I really want to know about, and I've talked about this in previous streams. If you guys have watched the previous streams where we talked about Saga, is the inspiration behind it. I've been playing D&D since I was in high school, and while I'm not old, but long enough that I've been playing since second edition, and we used to play like in between like classes during a lunch break, which was like 80 minutes long, and that kind of like started fueling this nerddom that I had. And and like when Tim talks in some of his videos that used to be on the Saga YouTube channel, it was really inspirational to talk about like how the influences come from that universe. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, if we go back far enough, even before tabletop got into my existence, um, reading was always my escape. So fantasy novels were first base for me. So especially, we were just talking about the Riftwar Saga by Raymond Feist. So if I can give you a handful of books that directly inspired the D&D campaign, which then inspired this ongoing evolution, specifically like the Riftwar Saga, like the and I'm blanking on the name of the Thieves Guild in that book right now in that series, but they played a factor in influencing the evolution of our birds, the blackbirds, which in turn evolved through actually a couple of different science fiction short stories I did, where they were an
Okay.
information network spread out across a few planets. And I've actually taken that and just iterated it into different universes as I've gone along and just continued working on it. So there's the future version and the past version and stuff. So that was a good example there. Tad Williams, the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series was an inspiration for the Ellen High and the Elden Eye. His elves are extremely interesting, very different than their traditional, say, Forgotten Realms,
Right.
Wood Elf versus High Elf versus Dark Elf. Um, those two series definitely played a heavy impact. The Wheel of Time for sure. Um, the Elemental magic system. So my inspiration always started off with novels, and then those just that reading all of these fantasy novels growing up and then getting into high school and stuff. So by the time I hit 16, 17, when I was introduced to second edition, it was just natural that's I took these inspirational sources and started to craft my own. So I was the nerdy kid in English class who would show up on Monday morning having handwritten a 15-page short story about this kid and a dragon or meeting a wizard, and then I would hand it out to my friends in class, and that sort of imaginatory journey just kind of kept evolving. So then in circa, I think it was around 1999, 2000, the memory is a bit fuzzy these days, but somewhere around there for various reasons. The time point around there was when I was living with some of my high school buddies, and I remember because I went and bought this. There was a pack, a D&D pack that they had in a
Okay.
box set. And it came with like a few different games, and then it also had like a map builder in there. So I had this, this is before inkjet printers, so you have like a dot matrix printer and this map maker program, and I literally did this like 6 foot by 5 foot or something map, and I printed out each individual page of
Nice.
this world that I had drawn out, and then we just basically spent that summer. It was just smoking weed and playing D&D. That's all we did for like 4 months, and that was
Sounds like
the
a fun night.
original creation of that world. And then that went through iterations where I think at one point we actually, back in the day, there used to be this thing called EasyBoard, which was where like the original like server forums for like some of the EverQuest servers, like I was on Moral Fool for EverQuest, so our server forum was on EasyBoard, and so we used that platform, and we had a for those of you who know what this is, but it was called, we did play by post. So
Right.
we actually took the world of Lucimia and created this play by post world on EasyBoard, and we ran that for about 3 years. And I remember EasyBoard changed companies, it became Y something, and then there was a big server outage, and we lost like 2.5 years worth of role playing material that was up on that site.
Aw.
And then all I was left with was all the old, the scrapbooks and all the notebooks and everything else. But at the same time, I'd done all that world building and everything else.
Right.
And around that time was when I ended up moving to Bulgaria. And the first week I was there, I sat down, I wrote a short story called The Medallions of Lashiva, which is set in Fingless Mirror. But it's not quite the same lore as what evolved into what we have now. But that's actually up on the website. It's also in the Bloody Knuckles anthology.
Okay.
But that was the first official story in that world. And then I wrote the first 12 chapters of the first novel in 2008, and then the outline for the 4 books. And then was like that was the beginning of my career as a writer, and I started making way more money doing
When did you originally publish the current novel that's out?
December of this last year, so a few months ago.
And you've already got 3 more novels ready to like
No,
outline?
yeah, the outlines are done. I've already done, and I've done about 55,000 words in volume 2, so I'm already drafting that one right now. So that, hopefully I'll have the draft done by late summer, then it'll go through revisions, and then theoretically I'll have that out at the year anniversary of volume 1, so I'll publish that December or January, probably January.
So what you're essentially saying is that you're not going to take 10 years like Rothfuss to put out a book, or however long Martin. Yeah. So that's good.
No, that drives me nuts when they do that. I think it's also a case of these guys want to make hay while the sun shines. And when you're getting all of these, I mean, Rothfuss is a good example. Martin's the best example because he went a long time being a successful writer, but then Game of Thrones was like, oh my God, now I can make all this money, so I'm going to do all this other stuff rather than work on this novel because I'm finally getting a payday. And Rothfuss is the same thing. You know, he's a couple of books out, and then he got famous, and now he's off doing all these D&D shows and speaking engagements and everything else, and that's fine. But at the same time, I abhor that as a reader, and I will never put my readers through that. At the most, a couple of years. But the only reason it takes a couple of years for a traditional, you know, if you look at the way publishing works, there's such a huge timeline between the first draft being written and then all the revisions.
Right.
And then you've got to get publication and scheduling and then book tours and all this other stuff. And it's one thing to be, you know, Sanderson and being Tor's Golden Boy, and you know you're doing all this stuff on contract, and then self-publishing like we're doing, because there's pros and cons to it. But on the flip side, you know, it's very quick and easy to get something out the door. It's not always going to be as polished as it would be if it's gone through, you know, 18 different rounds of edits, but at the same time I can get it out there and not have to worry about spending, you know, making fans wait 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, and that's kind of awesome. And like I think a big thing too is like I'll take Rothfuss specifically because I've never actually read the Game of Thrones novels, even though I've seen every episode. By the way, last night's episode, anyway.
Boring.
Whatever. But anyway, Rothfuss is like, I discovered him a couple of years ago, and he's been writing for a long time, and, you know, he had kind of like a small following, and then he, like you said, he's blown up over these past few years. And like these books, I'm not really an avid reader. Like I usually read like 700-page novels, not like 1,200-page books like, you know, Rothfuss and Martin are writing. And then I get through the end of the second book and the Kingkiller Chronicles, and I'm thinking, you know, there's rumor that this new book is going to come out. Well, that was 5 years ago. So it's
Martin's fans have had to wait a lot longer. It's been like 7 years since the last one. Yeah.
I'll never do it again. Like whenever I find a new universe, I'm going to make sure if it's a trilogy, the trilogy is already out, so that way I can binge it.
So this actually, on the same note, my wife and I quit bothering, and I'm going to make one exception here, and I'll tell you why we made the exception, but we quit bothering with the shows that make you wait every week to watch a new episode. I'll just wait till the whole thing's out, and then we'll binge watch it, because that's what we prefer. The exception to that was this last season of Game of Thrones. The reason for that being, if you didn't watch it within the first like 24 hours, 48 hours, you can't even go on social media because everybody and their brother is posting shit, and everyone's like spoilers, but at the same time they're posting screenshots and captions which give away different scenes,
and they're making memes and all this stuff.
Right. So it's like I don't want to have to deal with trying to avoid social media for like 72 hours or 3 months, while I wait for the whole season to come out. In this case, it was only 6 weeks, but you know what I mean? I don't want to have to try to, I can't, I have to be on social media every day. So I made an exception this time, and we watched weekly episodes.
Well, that was probably a good idea, considering.
I am caught up, so yeah.
So you did watch last night's episode?
Oh yeah, I'm fine with it. So
you're fine with it?
I'm fine with it. Yeah, I can't give away spoilers.
Yeah, we don't want to spoil it for you guys, but I want to say, like, I'm kind of in the boat with the rest of the universe where we're all kind of let down in a way, because like the whole series is like this kind of like edginess that leads you up to like this major event, and then the end is kind of like, here's some closure.
Well, you know, they have so many groundbreaking, epic episodes that are like, oh my God, what the hell did I just watch? And then, you know, it's this season, you know, it's It's okay.
I can give you some post-show feedback on why I'm okay with the way things turned out and stuff. Because
Fair enough.
if
And-
you, there's some character arcs that if you really paid attention to the nuances of the characters, you saw it coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can get some of that, but that's not what we're talking
Yeah, we'll
I
move
could
on
go
from
down
that.
the rabbit hole on this, man. I don't want to do that.
All right, so back on the topic of Saga.
Sure.
So we talk about like obviously like it's more of a rich background like that goes back a long time, even further than I had realized, because I was thinking late 1990s, but you're referencing novels, series from years and years and years ago, and you've mentioned this before that like the books are an inspiration for the questing mechanisms
Sure.
that are in Saga. But so tell us a little bit about like the motivation to make Saga the way it is, versus your traditional like modern MMO.
I just think that, well, that's a multifaceted question.
It is, and take as much time as you need.
From a lore perspective, from a story perspective, I really liked the way Lord of the Rings Online did it, because they took, here's this existing world with an existing series of novels.
Mhm.
We're going to create this world that's based off of those novels, and there's going to be a primary storyline that kind of follows in the footsteps of the main characters and the main events that happen throughout the series of these books. But around that, we have a lot of room for sort of experimentation within the boundaries of the lore. So that's the essence of what we're doing is from a story's perspective, that's how we're doing it. And then the next layer of that question is that we're doing things. I've always liked to describe our game more as a digital version of a tabletop game than just an MMORPG. Because when you say MMORPG, almost everyone immediately triggers to quest hubs and end game and leveling curve
Yeah, my man.
5-minute
Man.
dungeon runs and hard modes and all this other shit. And I want people to my personal desire is for people to think more about this as a world or a setting within which they can have adventures. Just like when you pick up a Dungeon Master's Guide for D&D, you have a rule set and a place where you can host your own adventures. You can play through the modules that they have if you want, but you can also create your own adventure within that lore and that world space and within that rule set. And that to me makes a far more entertaining game, or I should say a far more entertaining world than it does just a video game.
Experience.
Yeah, it's more about creating this world where players can have the experience that they want to have, as opposed to just being on the rails in a theme park, which is what the traditional MMORPG has come to be known as in the last 15, 20 years.
Right.
Now having that
basically
main
since the first generation.
having that main story arc, though, I mean, do you feel like that is are there quests in place that feel more sandboxy, or do you still feel like to be an MMO and to appeal to the masses, there still has to be some sort of essence of a theme park there?
Well, there has to be things for people to do. That much we've learned. I mean, there's a lot of industry data out there which just shows you that the way people play games today is not the way we played them 20 years ago. First and foremost, free to play makes games far more accessible. Not only that, there's hundreds of games that people can play. So it's not like 1999 when there was 5 games that people could choose from. Now there's 500. So you have to give people stuff to do, and it has to be entertaining stuff to do. Otherwise, they'll go somewhere else where they're having fun and being entertained. So I would say that, yes, there are theme park elements. John and I have worked hard on it. We're still working on it right now, but I think the goal right now is we'll probably be launching, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but I think it's less than 80 quests is the goal. And the reason for that is because, we're kind of breaking things down into, there's the Volume 1 quest line, which is what I work on, and then there's the city quests, then there's the zone quests, then there's dungeon quests, and then there's faction quests. So when I say factions, you can think of things like the Thieves Guild, the Blackbirds, the Adenthon, which are the Mage Guild, the Scholars Guild. There's going to be the Adventurers Guild, which we haven't quite figured out what we're calling them yet. There's various different guilds that you can join, and each one of these zone, city, dungeon, faction will have a storyline that you can follow that is a linear by nature. And they will lead you to places where you have the opportunity to find other things to do. But the big difference between our game and other games is we don't have experience points. So when you're doing these
Yes.
quests, you're not doing them to level up your character. You're doing
Right.
them specifically for the reason of lore, the pursuit of exploring the world, and having something to do with your friends, as opposed to just, oh, I'm doing this because I'm getting 15 experience points and
Yeah.
I need to level up my character.
Yeah, and that has led to this immersive experience. Like when, all right, so we've been hyped about Pantheon, and then I'm just like, okay, well, what's another MMO that's going to come out this year that we can talk about? Because we're not Pantheon centric. We just talk about MMOs, right?
Sure.
So I'm going through, the MMORPG.com, and I'm looking through this stuff, and I was like, yeah, I know about, Chronicles, I know about Ashes, That's not an MMO. How can you say that's an MMO? Well, what is this Saga of Lucimia? And then I go to your site, and one of the first things I see, this has nothing to do with the topic, I'm kind of digressing here, is the fact that, like, you have this whole section of why not to pre-order your game. And I
Yes,
fucking loved
so-
it. I was like, these dudes are so real. Like who tells people that? But it makes sense.
Punk was telling me about that too, man. He was reading it off to me, and I'm like, oh my god, that's fucking hilarious.
That
Great.
post, I'll tell you why that post exists. So when we first started this, it was just a few of us. We were posting stuff on Facebook, and then friends were like, "You're building it." It's like, well, we're just playing around, and then it became serious. And we got more people involved, and
Right.
by the time we got to 2015, we formed the LLC, and then we launched the pre-order store. So when all of that started to come to a head, all of these different sites picked up on us. MMORPG.com, massively OP, a bunch of other places. And the number one, and I talked about this somewhere recently, I don't remember where, but like when we first went on MMORPG.com, somebody started a thread that at the time was the number one most viewed thread on MMORPG.com ever in the history
Wow.
of their website. And the overwhelming theme within that thread was some guy had posted this post about, hey, check out this new game that's now available for pre-order. It looks pretty cool. And then the shitstorm broke, and it was literally all of these, people where you've got a very divided community. On the one hand, you've got all these people who are saying this looks really cool, and then there's this plethora of it's impossible, you're never going to be able to do it, you've never made a game before, there's no way you can do it, it's impossible. And as time went on and we were still around, et cetera, that first post went up, I think, at the end of 2015
Okay.
as a reaction to those people from these various websites who were telling us that it was impossible. And
Awesome.
that was my tongue-in-cheek way of saying, look, nobody's putting a gun to your head and forcing you to pre-order our game. Either you like what we're doing or you don't. But at the same time, it's like, why are you up in arms? Why does it matter if we're not for
Right.
you? If it's not something that interests you, why is it such a big deal that it's of interest to other people? So that post was just a very sarcastic, and you can ask anybody on the team. I have toned it way down over the last 4 years. I used to get in trouble at Mac massively for making comments about the ADD generation of gamers, and
You're not wrong, though. You're not wrong. It is an ADD generation of gamers.
Yes and no. I mean, yeah, but at the same time, there's a certain level of political correctness that has to come with when you start getting a bigger profile. So, but yes, that post started off then, and then it was just every year we would update it with the latest video. And oh, by the way, we've also had these things happen. We've earned these accolades, and we've grown the team by this much, and we've done these things. So by the end of last year, it was, to be crass, it was also a way of me, flipping the middle finger to all the naysayers who said that we weren't going to be able to make it happen. So it was tongue in cheek, but also at the same time, it's a way to say, yeah.
Yeah. And to kind of bring it back to the topic, though, that's what kind of drew my attention to it. And I was just it was Def and I were hanging out. It was probably 2 o'clock in the morning. We're just bullshitting. And I'm
Something
just
like that.
dude, look at this right now, because we're big fans of digital extremes, because we love how transparent they are with the gaming community. And when you put that up there, and then I got into your Discord and I was like, these dudes talk to people this is reminiscent of what we've seen with DE. And
Yeah.
that game started off as this game, you looked at it and you're like, this game's kind of shit, but I'm curious. and then now it is this powerhouse that it is today. Speaking of Warframe, that is. So like that really made me look more into the game, and then I started reading into more of the the FAQs, and then started watching the videos that you had on the SOL official page on YouTube, where it wasn't just about your game, but it was about the inspiration of what makes SOL into it. So that whole idea, going back to the no experience points, the immersion in SOL, just from the single like really game alpha test that I did, like I felt like I was just a normal dude trying to do dude things because I'm not a hero. But what's to say I can't be if I figure out how to be?
There is a post on. It might even be one of the Mondays. I think it's one of the Mondays in MMORPG episodes, which is what defines epic. And there's we go through a lot of different books. We look at Jason the Argonauts. We look at Zeus and the other gods going up against the Titans. We look at, the Serenity Crew from Firefly. We can look at Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring. In all of these cases, you have these major characters who, godlike or amazing though they might be, still can't complete tasks on their own.
Right.
So if you strip that back and go back to the very beginning, the one thing, and I did a blog post about this years ago, and I think the title is "You're Not a Special Flower." I didn't use snowflake; I said flower. But it's like you're not special. There's the hero trope has been done to death. Movies,
Yes.
shows, books. Everyone starts off, "You're the prophesied one. You will go on to save the world." We've seen it a million times. So I much preferred to take it back to tabletop setting.
Sure.
You have PC status and NPC status is the way I've always looked at it.
Right.
So the player character and non-player character, and an NPC is just an NPC. They're cannon fodder, and a PC has that special spark of something that allows them to transcend being just a farmer or just the blacksmith's apprentice or just the tavern maid or whatever. So I'd like to think that all of the characters have that spark within them, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't do anything with it. It's no different than you might be a talented piano player, but you just never liked music, so it never just was your thing.
Right.
But had you chosen a different path in life, you might have become, a composer or something. So everybody has that opportunity within them, but it's not just a given that you're this hero. You need to go out and work for it and figure out if that's actually what you're going to be. And some people might not be. Some people might decide that they just want to be a merchant or a crafter or a blacksmith.
And that's okay.
And that's fine. That's a gameplay style that you're living within the world, pursuing what it is that you want to pursue.
Right.
You don't necessarily have to be the hero.
I think that's really where a lot of MMOs have dropped the ball. And Def, we've talked about this too, is like, you don't have to rush to endgame or even take the slow stroll to endgame and have these adventures. Like, it's an MMORPG. Yes, there's an adventure aspect, but a lot of these older games that we've talked about on this channel did have aspects that allowed you to do something outside of the adventure. And I was telling Def, like, what if I just want to be like this world-renowned woodcrafter, and I start off as a nobody, and I don't actually go get the wood. I just use the profits I've made to purchase the wood, because you as an adventurer are geared, and you can go to those areas where that rare wood drops. And like look at newer modern MMOs. Like, you got a guy like that's doing gathering, and it's just like this menial task that you have to do for an hour every day before you go to bed, because you've got to get your crafting materials. Like, it's not like respected. Like, it's just like this supplemental thing. Whereas if you think about it in a sense of like like tabletop, like if you were looking for a rare piece of armor or something like that, you would generally go to, like, you'd have this quest to meet this rare crafter, and if you missed the opportunity to go on that quest, you may have never received like this +3 greatsword or whatever. So like, for a PC to be able to take on that aspect of the game, like, I think that's going to be awesome.
I've always hated. Sorry, my bad.
No, go ahead.
I've always hated this aspect of getting to end game, because then you never have that adventure. You know what I mean? And it's like if I'm level 23, I want to use the tools I have and go explore the zones and go as deep as I can, and enjoy my tool set that's presented to me, you know. And I
Right.
always hate this thing where you have to rush to end game because that's where all the fun's at, you know. Like,
So I know
go
you
ahead.
played EverQuest back in the day, along with myself and many of other teams, and
Hell
that's the
yeah, I did.
one thing. So we did this experiment. I think probably late 2016. I think it was one of our first or second outings with our Saga of Lucimia gaming community, where I did this what I call the gaming experience, because we were on MMORPG.com and there was this. We were talking about creating dungeons that take weeks to months for players to complete,
Oh
because
shit.
the concept. Well, there's some considerations to that statement.
Mhm.
I was using the comparison of these modern day dungeons where people call a hard mode dungeon, it takes 15 minutes and they call it a hard mode. And that drives me bonkers, because I can
Right.
remember back in the day going into a dungeon like Soul A or Soul B and spending 6 weeks in there. So
Dude,
as an
Soul B
example,
was one of my favorite zones. Go ahead.
right. So as an experiment, we went on P99 and we streamed it. We streamed it for like, I want to say 3 or 4 weeks. And we literally, all we did for 3 or 4 weeks was Befallen. We literally went in at like level, whatever, 8 or 10, and we just went level to level, session by session, worked our way through to the rooms, got everybody their keys through the door, down into the ledge, camped the ledge for a few sessions, made it a little bit deeper, camped there for a few sessions, made it a little deeper. And over the course of like 3 or 4 weeks, we showed how a dungeon that's done in the old school manner can literally last players weeks. And Befallen is a very small dungeon. If you start to think about some of the bigger dungeons that came along in EverQuest later on as the game got bigger, um,
Yeah.
Chardock,
Oh my
KC
god.
and Kunark, and then
Preach it,
going
bro.
into like, yeah, and then going into like Velius and spending, how many weeks or months did you spend in Kale farming
Kale.
armor?
I was
Or
about to say Kale, man.
right. So there was this, this concept of today where you've got these. We're gonna do a 15-minute hard mode. That to me is not a dungeon. It's a
Yeah.
daily. So I have a Star Trek game that's on my mobile phone that I literally just play when I have nothing else to do, when I'm going to bed at night or I'm in the bathroom. And all I do on it is dailies. That's it. It's like these little 15, 20-minute sessions that I'll play on that. And that's what the modern MMORPG is like.
Yes.
You're doing these
Yes.
15, 20-minute sessions. And
100%.
we really liked that old school mythology of, forget about the end game. Let's talk about, here's a level 10 dungeon that you can go spend 6 weeks in, and you'll come out level 30. We don't have levels in our game, so I'm using that as an example. You go in, you spend 6 weeks, you come out, you're significantly more powerful. And guess what? You've only seen one dungeon out of the 30 that are in the game.
Yeah.
And that was the cool thing about early EverQuest was, you had all these different starting areas. So I literally to this day have never played through like the dark elf evil side of things. I've gone to like Lava Storm and stuff, but
Yeah.
and done Soul A and Soul B, but I always played like a wood elf or a dwarf. So I always started off in Fadeware. And so my
Yeah.
run was always, Greater Fadark, Crushbone, Dagnar's Cauldron, Unrest, and then we went from there.
That, that's
Whereas
so
if you played
funny.
a human, it was the other side of the world.
Yeah. That's so funny because when we were playing P99, I made trolls because I've never started out on that side of the world, and it was just so refreshing and so new and fun at the same time.
Yeah.
Ren, what is your EverQuest background? Like, what server did you play on?
Moral Fool is where I started off.
Okay.
So my EverQuest story was, I started off as a wizard and played it for like 2 days and said,
Yeah.
fuck this, I'm dying too much. So I
Yeah.
made a ranger, and that was like, this is more my play style. So I had this wood elf ranger, and this is my favorite EverQuest story. This is a perfect example of early EverQuest, what community meant when it used to
Give it
be
to me.
about community. So level like, I think around 9. This is before Wikipedia's. This is before EQ Atlas. This is when you're drawing hand-drawn maps, and
Yep.
there's no information out there on any of this stuff. All you had was the map that came with the box. So, I'm doing the whole thing, and I'm killing orcs, and I go into Crushbone a few times, and I've managed to save up enough money to get like a full set. I went and bought myself a full set of chainmail from like one of the NPC vendors.
Nice.
And this is, by the way, this is probably 2 or 3 months after the game launched. I found out about it in line for toys at the Star Wars celebration in Denver in 1999, and we were talking about D&D, and these two guys behind me were like, dude, you should try this new game that just came out called EverQuest. I literally went home and got high-speed internet and everything that week, and like within a, but I was a couple months into it. Anyway, level 9, chainmail, everything else. I'm playing with these guys, and he starts to tell me about this place over on the other side of the world, where there's all these knolls, and it's by this place called Kinos. And I'm like, well, how the hell do I get over to this place you're telling me about? And he's like, so here's what you do. And he literally is explaining it to me in terms of the world map. He's like, you got to go into Butcher Block, and you got to find the ferry, and you want to go northwest and find the ferry, get on the boat, and you're going to take the boat to Freeport. And then from Freeport, you're going to head west, and you're going to go all this stuff, and you're going to go through the forest, and you're going to get to the gorge, and you're going to go through the pass and go to the blah 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 blah. So the first thing he didn't tell me was Kithakor turns into undead at night. So when I get to the zone line, everybody's like, there's just all these people camped at the zone line. I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, it's dangerous. So I poke my head in, everything's red. And I'm like, oh shit. So, all right, you wait a little bit, everything else. So I run through daytime. I get to the pass. I run into the pass. Bam. Right into orcs, dead. Loading. Please wait. I'm back in Kelethan, naked. No one had ever told me about Bind. So
Oh my
I had just
God.
spent like 2 weeks or whatever of game time. Like I was effing devastated. I'm like a 19-year-old kid. I've just spent 2 weeks in this world, like completely immersed in this character. Spent all my gold and everything to buy this badass chainmail set, and then it's all gone. Didn't know about Bind, and I'm standing there naked, by the priest of Discord, and there was a dwarf cleric and a barbarian shaman who started role playing with me, like, why are you naked, and blah blah blah. And so I told him the story in character, told him what had happened, and they proceeded to craft me a full set of banded gear, invited me into their guild. Within 2 weeks I was an officer in their guild, and then that was like 3 years with those guys, playing and doing like a raid alliance. And then I got into full-time raiding with Fury's Edge and another guild I can't remember now. And then played that all the way up until EverQuest 2 came out, and then I switched over to EverQuest 2, which is why I never played World of Warcraft Classic, because I was too busy with EQ2.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that's my original EverQuest story, and I played that ranger for many, many years.
That is kind of what I miss about EverQuest was, you get these veteran players or high-level players. They're always like so down to help out the lower level people, and even if you go to Kelethan, and there's just high levels there ready to buff you, give you porch. It's a whole different mentality than what
it's a
we
different
see
ball
today.
game these days.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that WoW and these more modern MMOs didn't start that way, because I can remember vanilla WoW, I can remember Burning Crusade, and then once you start to see the evolution toward like catering to the casual, then that's where the mentality came to this whole like special snowflake situation where everybody's, oh, I'm a raider, I'm awesome. And you're like, dude, I remember back in the day when I was like the only shaman of 6 shamans on the server that that had T6. Like, I'd just be standing there, people would come up to me and be like, oh dude, your armor's so badass, can you teach me how to play? And now it's like everyone's like, oh, I'm a raider.
So this actually came up recently when we were doing the Caledon server for EQ2, and somebody from Insanity were all level 50 within like the first 48 hours or whatever, and within like a week somebody was talking to me because they knew me from the forums on MMORPG.com and everything else, and we were just talking, and then they got to bragging and like linked me their prismatic weapon, and we're like, well, I'm in Insanity, and here's my weapon. And I literally, I just like, that's cool. But my gut reaction inside was like, dude, I did that as a server first, 15 years ago when it mattered. You're doing it on a progression server when you guys were able to blow through the content in like 2 days, when it took us how many months to get to that point, So it's funny when you talk about that kind of stuff. But also, you just touched on something where it's it's like a balancing act of understanding that there's a certain level of expectation these days in modern games to allow for the customization of your avatar, but you also lose that recognition
Right.
of being the badass who went with 40 people to get that item, and you're one of only 40 people who has that on the server. So, that's one of those mechanic things we have to look at in terms of our own game, of how we're looking at designing things to make sure that, because we really love the idea of your gear means something. Like, that should be a
Yes.
status symbol, as opposed to, and I'm not knocking cosmetics. I spend money on cosmetics as much as the next person. Star Wars: The Old Republic, Lord of the Rings Online, ESO. I have spent real cash on cosmetic items to make my guy look cool.
Oh, your
However,
guy.
you
Okay, so you're not
completely
running around with the
lose.
uwu anime character.
No, but you lose
Yeah.
you lose that impact of people knowing that you were somewhere special, that you did
Yes.
something to get to that armor.
Yeah, and that's the thing, man. Like, gear had meaning. Even again, back to early days of WoW, like gear had a certain meaning, not like it did in EQ or Final Fantasy 11, but like it had that. There were certain pieces that you couldn't get, like the higher tier gears. Like when T6 was out, the most guilds were still rating T4. And you're like, oh yeah, good job, nice, good for you. Like that's not unimpressive. But now it's like everybody's clearing whatever raid it is, and you've got to find that balance somewhere, because you want players like us that want to have that meaning, but at the same time, you've got to have that flow that kind of engages the modern player in a way.
Sure.
Yeah, like an EQ1, they would see a worm slayer, like, dude, you got a wormy, or
Yeah,
like,
and you knew what the Worm Slayer was, and you also knew what a pain in the ass it was to get.
Hell yeah.
Because it was not something that you could just get for $5 or at the drop of a hat. I mean, it was weeks worth of work, sometimes months, depending on how often you played.
And the FBSS, man, lower Guck.
I hated that camp. The worst one I ever did was the eye patch of you had to kill that
tip of
I
my
forget
tongue
something
right now.
in Velius. It was a griffin or a turtle. I don't remember now. It's been too long. But it was like a really long spawn timer, and yeah, that was not a fun camp.
Dude, is it in the
Eye patch?
Korean?
No, it was in that first zone you get into in Velius, and I can't remember the name of it, where the gnome boat takes you.
Great Divide?
No, that's the other zone, where the Tower of Frozen Shadow is.
Oh my god, I feel
Eastern
like
Waste? Iceland Waste? I don't remember anymore. It's been too
Eastern
long.
Waste. I think it's EW, man.
It might be EW, yeah.
I think
One of those had the Rygor fort, and I can't remember now. It's been too long. But yeah, those long camps.
I love how I can't relate to you guys because my computer was too shit to run EQ back in the day. I had to play Final Fantasy 11. And no, in all fairness, I tried my best to get into the EQ universe. I started with EQOA before I switched over to Final Fantasy when it came out on the PlayStation 2.
I never did EQA.
Everyone says it was shit, but there's some people who swear by it. So
I've heard good comments, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it, sort of. I came from a mud environment, so it was very hard to transition from a mud where everything was very detailed and in depth to going to a visual MMO where there were different systems in place.
Thank you, Adric. It's ice clad. That's what.
Yeah, I was just seeing the chat.
Yeah.
So I want to bring this back. So we're talking about some of these other MMOs and things. Nathan had asked a little bit ago. Nathan Napalm asked, "What are some of your other MMO backgrounds? Like, what brought you to where you are today?"
Like, what games have I played?
Yeah.
EverQuest 1. So we talked about this briefly before the show. So EverQuest 1, I was a hardcore raider. By the time I got to EverQuest 2, we were running our own guild. I spent about 8 years, a little under 8 years, running a high-end raid guild. We were in the top 10 worldwide for EverQuest 2, top 2, top 3 on our server, depending on who you talked to at the time. Did that for a long time. Played EQ2 fairly progressively, but I was very lucky in that I was one of the first people to get an alpha invite into Vanguard. So I got into Vanguard when it was only about 25, 30 people in, and spent about 18 months in the Vanguard alpha and into beta and into live. So then our guild kind of, as soon as it went live, we went into Vanguard. Unfortunately, we were number 1 on our server. We were on the Florendal server. and ran the guild Haven. Originally Stormhaven in beta, but then we were Haven and Florendale. It was us and Halcyon Affinity were neck and neck, but we got world forced on all of the wardstone stuff. And anyway, we basically found out that we got to like level 40 and the zones were empty and there was like no mobs and unitemized zone quests weren't even around, and we just found a game that was launched completely broken and unfinished.
What? So it was launched that
So
way?
it's just unfortunately like some
Oh.
of the higher end zones just weren't completed because they just didn't really anticipate people getting there that quickly.
Fair enough.
But we were literally playing at that point. I mean, we were number one server, so we were playing an exhausting amount of hours per week as a top tier raid guild.
Right.
So I did that, and then when we found that there was nothing for us to do, it was like, well, we're not going to wait around for these guys to finish this. You know, we want to do stuff. So then we dove into Lord of the Rings Online. Had been out for a few months by that point, I think. So we dove into Lord of the Rings Online, played that for a few years. Then we were back in EQ2 for a couple of years. I've played Star Wars: Old Republic. I have not raided full time since I think the last time I raided was when the Kunark expansion was in EQ2, so we were doing our mythicals. That's probably 2009, 2008, somewhere around in there. I don't really remember the timeline exactly. That was the last time I really raided full time. And then since about 2010, I've been very much a casual player who only plays about 15, 20 hours a week. And I've done, like Star Wars: Old Republic. I was in the a lot of people might not remember this game, but they had a Stargate MMO that was in development for a long
Really?
time. I was in the alpha for that and in the beta for that, and then it went bankrupt. It was a horrible, unfortunate tragedy, but it was a lot of fun being a part of
That
that for
sounds
like a year and a
awesome.
half. It was a great game.
Ugh.
Unfortunately, just bankruptcy. Guild Wars 1, Guild Wars 2. I mean, I've probably played all the major ones. I've tried the Final Fantasy series. I can't get into the Asian MMO style. I've dabbled in.
I was the same way, man. But
I have played it pretty seriously. I've had 2 stints where I've done Final Fantasy 14 for about 3 to 4 months each time.
yeah.
But I always find myself after 3 or 4 months like, Same thing with ESO. I'll get into ESO for like 3 or 4 months and then I'm like,
Yeah.
And I haven't really stuck with a game for a long time. And then we frequently go back, especially with our gaming community. We like to go back to the old games. So we've gone back and we've done P99. Man, I want to say 3 times. We've done the live servers for EQ1, I think twice. This was our second run of EQ2. The first time was end of 2016, I believe. We went and did the mythical. So we just did the Kunark expansion over like a 3 or 4 month period of time. And then some of us stuck around and did a little bit of the Velius content for EQ2.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I've played most of the MMOs of most of the major ones. I'm probably forgetting some in there somewhere, but yeah.
Well,
But
you
you
haven't said anything
but,
about WoW.
but you said
Yeah, no, that was the thing. I only dabbled in WoW around Burning Crusade. I did a rogue up to 70,
Okay.
and so I probably played for about 4 months, but I never raided or anything. And it was like right before Lich King, and then I went back into EQ2. So that was
Okay.
at that point it was like, yeah, I'm gonna go back into EQ2 and keep raiding there.
So when you
which is
quit
why I'm so
being
stoked for Classic.
when you quit being engaged into raiding and being fully like, I got to play this game, would you say that would be Kunark in EQ2?
No, yeah, the Rise of Kunark when we did your mythicals. Like after I got my mythical, that was kind of like the end of my hardcore, like I'm doing this 60 hours a week kind of thing.
Okay. That's yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because we did mythicals, and then after that, I remember I played because this is actually funny. When I first started getting going as a writer, I touched on this briefly earlier. I was working on the book, but then I started making more money doing contract work. So one of the first things I started making money on was I was doing game guides for, I think they were called killer guides. They might still be around. I don't know. I did 3 Lord of the Rings online guides, and then they were class guides, and then I did the Shadow Odyssey guide for EverQuest 2. So that was the last expansion I played through, was the Shadow Odyssey, but I didn't raid in the Shadow Odyssey. I played through the dungeons, which were amazing. And that was a really good expansion, but that was the last expansion I played for EverQuest 2.
And you got paid to make guides?
Yeah, and it was good money too, because the upfront money was shit. I'll be honest, the upfront money was not that great, but the commissions, if your guide was gold rated or beyond, and all my guides were gold rated, so I had 4 guides out, and I was making about $3,000 a month in commissions. So I mean, it
That's
turned
awesome.
out for being a starting writer at the time, that was like my first professional gig. I literally got it because I'm no joke here. I had a gaming resume. I was like, here's what my guilds have done in the last 10 years in games, and and that got me the job. So
Nice.
yeah, the upfront pay was only a few $100s, but the commissions more than made up for it.
You hear that, people? Tim got paid to make guides, and y'all out there putting that shit out for free.
For free. What are you doing?
What are we doing, Dev? We're doing it wrong, man.
Let's
wait,
play
we-
videos. What are you
We make
talking
all
about?
that YouTube money. I forgot.
All right, I'm gonna bio. I'll be right back.
Yeah, we're going to take a 5, guys. I'm going to throw us on an AFK. Don't leave. When we come back, we're going to talk more about Saga of Lucimia, specifically mechanics and things like that, and see if we can pry some timelines out of Ren while he's not here. So we'll be right back in about less than 5 minutes.
I guess I'll go pee too.
All right, we are back.
Sorry, guys. Had to go
And
pee.
sorry, I'm sucking on a cough lozenge because all the forest fires around here have given me coughing fits. So I apologize if you hear me sucking on something.
So I have a question. How does Joe Rogan sit there for 4 hours and never get up to take a piss?
Oh, it
He
happens.
does sometimes.
does?
Now
It happens.
they quit doing the live shows a few weeks ago. Now that's all pre-recorded. But
Oh,
no, if
okay.
you
No. They started back because they got
Did he?
a lot of shit for that. Yeah.
yeah.
He
So
got
if
a
you've
lot of
actually
shit.
ever sat through one of his 4-hour episodes, usually about 2 hours in, they'll take a break. Like somebody will get up and go pee.
Gotcha. Okay. See, I've only caught them pre-recorded, like when they're uploaded.
Well, my problem is
afterwards.
I had the smoothie one as we were getting going, and then my wife made me a margarita right started, so I was primed and ready to need a bio.
Battle Axe
I'm
Theater, where we talk about our pissing habits.
I'm on beer 6, so
6? Motherfucker, 6?
I got home at 4 to finish setting
Oh
up.
my god.
And I don't know if it's 6.
That's what happens when you move into a new home. The stress is so high.
It may be 5. I don't know.
Let's see your beer glass when you get done taking a drink. You showed it to me. Show everybody else.
Oh, well, I'm gonna throw it away because this series is such a disappointment.
Drinking, I know things.
You want to go
Yeah.
sign a petition and get them to rewrite it and air a whole new season like a baby?
No, I don't give a fuck. If they don't give a fuck, I don't give a fuck.
Fair enough.
I'm also gonna burn this flag.
Of House
I didn't-
Martell?
I didn't see any Martells come back.
Because they're all dead.
There's still like that one dude alive, right?
That one dude?
No spoilers.
Anyway, yeah, no spoilers. Okay, so back on the thing. So what I want to move forward with now is talking. So we talked a lot about your inspirations. What kind of made you want to make the game like this? Your background. I want to talk more about some of the mechanics. So let's talk about all right. So we don't have XP in the game. So can you tell us a little bit about the mastery system?
Right. So, it's a skill-based system. So in essence, instead of having character levels or a class, you're starting off as a nobody. And just like in tabletop, your stats define who you are. But in this case, we're also kind of taking these a little bit farther and saying, well, technically your grouping of abilities defines who you are, and your grouping of abilities define your stats. So we have what are called masteries, and masteries are groupings of skills. So think of thieving as a mastery, and within the thieving mastery line of skills are things like pickpocket, disarm trap, pick lock, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
You take that mastery and assign it to your character, and that will give you a boost to your dexterity. Same thing with if you took shield mastery, you would have shield bash and other things, and that would affect your strength or your constitution and so on and so forth. And then as you progress throughout the game, when you first start off, you'll have a very limited amount of masteries that you can choose from, a very kind of a basic list. And as you progress throughout the game and advance within the masteries that you have, you will unlock the ability to take on more masteries. And the vast majority of these, we can't, we can ballpark it, that's all we can do, but we've stated that 85% of the masteries and skills in our game will be found out in the wild, not in cities on a trainer. So there's 15% that are the basic things like tracking, one-handed sword, shield bash, that kind of stuff everyone will be able to teach you. But if you want to learn advanced tracking, you're going to have to first figure out who is the advanced tracker trainer in the world, and then you're going to have to find him.
That's the adventure there, man, right?
Well,
That's
and then there will
fucking
be
awesome.
prerequisites in order to have him teach you. He might say, "Oh, well, your faction's not good enough, or your dexterity's not high enough, or whatever the case may be," and you'll have to figure out what those prerequisites are in order to unlock that and progress deeper into whatever path you choose for your character.
And it really does, some of the things that you've said in Discord, I won't say too much, but you've basically said what we see now I thought was already a nice, ground level, like
It's a foundation
yeah,
layer.
exactly. But then you went on to say like there were all these other things that you guys are considering adding, and I was like, that sounds fucking amazing, because like you said, you're able to add masteries later on down the road, and that really allows you to, like, that's one of the things Def and I loved about ESO is like every class can be whatever,
Yeah.
Right.
and you can
So
kind of
and
go
this you
ahead.
kind of can, but at the same time, the way we've tied it to your stats, it's also a way that, in thinking back to like second edition D&D, everybody starts off with like leather armor.
Right.
And then as you progress, if you're a fighter, then you go to like studded leather, and then you go to chain, and then chain to banded, and banded to plate, and then
Right.
plate to full plate, and blah blah blah. And the way this works is that because you're only starting with a certain amount of masteries that you can slot in the beginning, your stats are locked and very limited when you're first getting started. But then you play for a couple of weeks and you get some new masteries, and now you can become a little more powerful. And then you become a little more powerful, and then you become a little more powerful. So it is very similar to that leveling curve that you would see in other games, but we're just doing it in a different way, where your character is, I guess, not leveling, but progressing more horizontally as opposed to vertically.
Right.
So you're just unlocking more skills. So, in the beginning, for example, you might not be able to wear plate mail when you first start your character because you're just not strong enough.
Right.
You're just,
Absolutely.
you're just a nobody. But you play the game, you get stronger, you're beating stuff up, you're swinging your sword a lot, and eventually you get to the point where, hey, I can put on chainmail now, and then
Oh, I
you do
missed
that for a
that.
little while, and then now I can put on plate mail, and it feels so. This is the other thing that I really missed about EverQuest, which is gear not only mattered, but when you got a piece of gear, it was something that you would use for months, not
Yes.
a couple of
100%.
hours.
Yeah.
So that's something we're very keen on going back to, which is that sense of accomplishment, even if it's something as simple as a piece of ordinary chainmail that's better than the rusty crap that you found on the
Yes.
dead orc.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it was like that in
and then
Final Fantasy 11, because like you'd have this really cool piece of gear that you had at level 7. Now you're level 35, and you can now wear the next tier of gear, and just that white piece of garbage Halbergen that you could wear, you're like, hell yeah, I need that. I'm gonna pay 1,000,000 gil for that just because it's got higher armor values and stuff.
we've talked a lot about people wore banded armor for 6-8 months before they got into raids and started getting
Yeah.
magical gear. So
And there's nothing
it's
wrong
it's
with
a
it.
very-
Nothing wrong with it. I think that's the biggest misnomer is like you've got to have stats on my gear. But if you think about it, like if you were in medieval times and you put on armor, it didn't make you stronger. It didn't give you more intellect. It was just more protection.
just weight you down.
So yeah, the mastery system sounds really cool, and I love that about the game because it does make you feel like you've got some sort of control over what you want to build. Like you're not rolling a bard, you're not rolling a wizard, you're not rolling a fighter. You're going into the game and you're looking at these, and you can call yourself whatever you want to call yourself. And I'm sure there's
Peasant.
I'm a peasant with powers.
Yeah.
I am the ultimate farmer.
I have a torch.
Oh, the torches! That whole torch mechanic as being part of the core of the game is
And
amazing.
that's
by the
why I
way.
say that because Punk, is explaining. He played the alpha testing or whatever that you guys had, and he was explaining to me, it's so dark, and you have this torch, and I'm like, oh my god, that sounds so immersive. I love that feeling to where you don't know it's 20 feet in front of you, and you're like scrolling through, and there could be danger around the corner.
I did a-
I haven't got to play the game yet, so
don't worry about that. We'll get you set up.
hell yeah, it works.
I did an early version of a Darkness series probably 3 years ago, in an earlier version, or alpha, it was our pre-alpha at that point, and I think it was a 5-part series, and it was literally me running around at night, like talking about what's going to be going on and the type of atmosphere it is, because when you can't, and you have to think we're also in where we're at right now with our game, you have ambient light because there's the moon and the stars.
Right.
But when you get into a dungeon scenario where it's completely pitch black, light source becomes more than just a thing. One thing that we were just recently playing, God, was it EQ2? Like Alt K or something. Like one of those buttons like turned your torch on and off. And it was like it's like this meaningless little bubble of light that's around your character, and that's all it is in modern games. It's just, I have a light source and I can instantly, everything's illuminated. And I mean, long term, your starting light sources in our game will be finite. They will be, what's the word I'm looking for?
Meaningful.
It'll use resources. So torches will burn out, lanterns need oil, all of these things. You'll need to get magical sources before you'll be able to have like a globe of light or an always on source. So a light source right now, it's always on because we don't have them. Expendable, that's the word I'm looking for. Or consumable, as Adric said. Long term, they will be consumables. So you'll actually have to think about it in the early stages of the game. A lot of these things, they'll go away as you progress your character. Once you get a magical source of light, it's
Right.
not going to be a big deal anymore. But in those early few weeks, few months of gameplay, it will make a difference, and it will make your life a living hell if you don't pay attention
See,
to
I
it.
think that's what's most appealing to me is like it's this feeling of like I'm not a huge D&D nerd to the point where like I've got stacks of characters I made up, but I love the concept of D&D, and to see that come into like a visual representation. Like if I'm going to walk into a dungeon and I pull out my torch and I can only see 15 yards in front of me, I'm okay with that. I don't need to see to the end of the dungeon and have a map that says if you go left here and right here. Like I want to feel like I'm immersed.
There's
Yeah.
also we're tying in the how far away you can see nameplates is tied to your perception stat and ability.
Oh, that's
So
sick.
That
the
is
reason
sick.
for that, part of that is because what we don't want is, for example, I've got a torch that can only see 15 feet, but I can tab target and I can see name tags 30 feet away. We don't want
Wow.
that. So there's a fine line that we have to pick,
That's
between
sick.
the realism of that.
That is
But
fucking
yeah,
awesome, dude.
if you can't see anything beyond that 15 feet radius, you shouldn't be able to see anything beyond that 15 feet radius, and that includes like name
Right.
tags.
So I mean that is pretty sick. So that was one of the things I wanted to talk about. If you're not going to have XP,
Sure.
how do you progress? Now, one thing that I was curious about when playing the alpha was from a survivability perspective. So like my character started off with like 24 hit points. I got all these masteries leveled up. Participated in the majority of the alpha. Apparently, I missed half of it. Sorry guys, I didn't know there was more, and I was busy that weekend. So maybe next time. But like what in terms of survivability? So like in D&D, you still level up. You get a hit die. Like how does it work in
Sure.
Saga?
So, in our game, everybody starts off with a very limited amount. I mean, if you've ever played, especially second edition AD&D, your hit die for a wizard was a 1d4.
Yes.
So you had between 1 and 4 hit points at level 1. So I've got a post up somewhere called One Shot, One Kill. And as people who have played our alpha can testify, even with 24 hit points, you can get one-shotted.
Yep. Absolutely. Seen it.
So the concept is that you'll start off with this base amount of hit points. Magical gear, relic gear, will allow you to modify that to an extent. Also, there will be things like probably we'll have some life magic buffs. Well, there is a caveat to all of this. We have a mandate that goes back to the earliest days of this project when we were coming up with a design for everything, and we said no skill bloat, meaning we're not going to have 50 hotbar abilities like EverQuest 2 or World of Warcraft, and no hit point bloat. So I really liked for example, even in D&D in classic, like first edition, second edition, even a 20th level paladin or warrior might have 120, 150 hit points. Like that was considered a badass high-end 20th level warrior. You had 150 hit points, and you had like -9 armor class, and your THAC0 was off the charts. Like, so we've taken that to heart and said that in our vision of what does an in-game character look like, an in-game character at this stage of our development, someone I'm talking a full-time raider who's been playing the game for a couple of years and he's fully decked out, might have a max of like 250 hit points. That's theoretical at this point. We might lower that a little bit because that might be a little too high for us. But the theory is that we never want you to feel safe.
Right.
Because if you have a hit point buffer of 5,000 hit points and you go back to the level 1 starting area, you're never going to feel threatened.
Right.
But if you've only got, say, 45 hit points and you started off with 24 and you go back to that area, and our zones don't just have, it's not just, level 1 to 5. It's lots of different things for lots of different ranges.
Right.
The theory is that we want you to always feel threatened and never feel safe. So you can feel more powerful. Nothing wrong with that. You deserve it. But you're never safe because anyone can roll a 20 and hit you, no matter
Yes.
how low of a monster they are.
So you heard it here, guys. You think Pantheon was going to be hard? You wait till you play Saga. What were you going to say, Dad?
I actually have a question.
Go ahead.
You were using tracking, skill tracking as an example.
Sure.
Will that be in Saga?
Yes. Tracking is
Okay.
definitely in.
Okay.
We don't have it in yet in alpha, but yeah.
Right. So, and you also mentioned that when you tab target, you won't be able to, tab 15 yards or whatever it may be in the game. So, will
I believe it's already like that. Bobby might be able to confirm.
Okay. Well, my main question is if you're able to skill up your tracking skill, will you be able to like let's say EverQuest 1, for example, once you got that skill,
Farther away, more
capped
things,
out.
etc. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you'll have an edge if you have
Yes.
your skill up. Okay.
Yeah, and then if you get like
Game.
when you go into advanced tracking, that's when you'll be able to start tracking different creatures. And we also have, without getting into too many details, we're also working with, so right now in alpha, earliest iterations, obviously, there is sight and sound. So mobs don't only see you, but they also hear you. And it's in its earliest stages, so it's not flawless. But as a general rule, if you're making too much noise, things hear you, they'll come for you. So it's not just about visual line of sight. So in a game like EverQuest 1, for example, it was all about line of sight. So you could easily get around mobs if you just went around their line of sight. This also is about audio cues, and we're also working
Like Final Fantasy 11.
right. And we also are working with we're not exactly sure how it's going to work into the game yet, but
Careful.
we're calling it the stink factor. But the original concept. Well, this is how it spawned. Was, I said, when you're playing D&D, let's say I put an invisible spell on myself.
Mm-hmm.
Some mobs can't see invisible, but some creatures can still smell me.
Yes.
They can see
Right.
through infrared, and they can still see my body heat. So there's lots of different ways. So invisibility is not a surefire way to get around in our game world. So there's lots of different ways. And to be honest with you, we were talking about this when Red Dead Redemption 2 came out. I think that was the game. I could swear that was the one, because you could go into the mode. I forget what the mode was called, but you could actually see like the stench of your character if you hadn't had a bath in a while, and it was like a wave, like these waves of like stink coming off your character. And I was like, that is the perfect visual representation of what I had in my mind when I thought about this years ago, which is, yeah, I have an invisibility spell on me, but that lizard man can sense my body heat.
Makes sense.
And can smell me. Can smell my blood. He's still going to know where I am, regardless of whether I'm not invisible.
So how do you rectify that? Do you implement some sort of like prestidigitation? Is it a visit to the inn? Like what would be the proposed solution?
We haven't worked that out yet.
Fair enough.
Take a
Fair
bath.
enough. Take a bath. Okay, got it.
No, but it's mostly just related to, there's going to be lots of different ways that mobs can detect you, as opposed to just being invisible.
And that's cool because it kind of it makes you adapt. So would you, for instance, if you were trying to stealth your entire group, are there going to be things like pass without a trace and stuff like that, or?
Well, in the case of, you might be able to have your ranger in your group like have an ability that allows you to move. Everybody can sneak or something like that, but that's not going to be guarantee of success, because they might smell you, they might hear you. I mean, there's lots of different things that can go along with that. You might roll, because it's not just a guaranteed success, because we're doing everything based on dice rolls.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just you make one roll and then you go. We're making rolls as you move,
Right.
Just like in D&D, where it's like, all right, you win 10 feet, another roll, you do another 10 feet, another roll. If I roll a 20, you're fucked. Like, your party is now engaged. Like, so there's that constant threat. This also, by the way, this is something that came up in one of our previous pre-alphas, where there's been a little bit of a disconnect from some players who weren't used to playing tabletop, because they're used to playing games where the taunt button is an instant, immediate, guaranteed aggro. And in our game, it's not, because first you have to roll to see if you land the taunt in the first place. 1 to 20,
There's a DC,
or
right?
1 to 100, and then you roll to see how effective your taunt was, and then there's other factors that go into mitigating the effect of that taunt.
Nice.
So there's a lot of things going on as dice rolls that other games don't do, because they just make the one roll and then you have success or failure.
Yeah.
How's it 2019 and this is really the first conceptual like realization of a true tabletop experience? Because I think that's really what UO
It's too risky. It's too risky.
Okay.
This is just business 101. Most game studios who are making games are in it for profit.
Right.
That's not to say we aren't, but we started this project as a passion project. So we were willing to do things that other companies weren't willing to do, because we weren't motivated by, we have a 6-year deadline to get this game out. We need to make $50 million to break even and pay our investors back.
Mm-hmm.
So companies want to make games as quickly and as cheaply as possible in order to generate revenue for either the studio or the investors who are backing them.
Right.
So there's this standard model, and every company might modulate that just a little bit and innovate in a couple of areas, like, oh, we're doing climbing a different way in our game, or oh, we're doing combat a different way in our game, or our magic system is slightly different. But at the end of the day, there's still these basic systems
Right.
which rely on, let's get the game out as quickly as possible because we need to make money for the company. And yes, we do have bottom lines that we have to worry about and everything else, but our primary motivation has always been, we wanted to build the game that we wanted to play, and no one else was building anything like this. So fuck it, let's go do it, and let's just make it happen. Who cares how long it takes? Let's just do it.
So you guys are the true, I mean, this is what game development was about in the beginning.
It's what it used to be, like in the 80s, early 90s, up until the 2000s. When it became a mass market thing, that kind of went away.
It's a bunch of nerds who wanted to see their stories and their tabletop come to fruition in something visually. Not nerds in a negative context, but
no,
I mean, but it's like and Julio. So you say EverQuest is the closest 3D MMORPG experience to D&D, and I will say that that's fairly accurate in the scope of what exists. But when we're talking about Saga, like the systems that are being explained, they seem more akin to like your old school MUD style systems. Like, did you ever play MUDs, Ren or Tim?
I did, yeah.
So,
quite a bit.
So MUDs
actually started off in AOL, like AOL.
Nice.
Fantasy chat rooms, yeah.
So these MUDs, they had these D20 systems that were in play in the background, and you had these different skill sets. I mean, they weren't exactly like you would get from Dungeons and Dragons or any other tabletop, but I think that's really where the inspiration for the visual MMO came from, was the MUD environment. That was where it started to turn this tabletop adaptation, and we never saw it really come to fruition in a visual MMORPG. And hearing about these systems, like I'm kind of nerding out a little bit over here.
I am
it's not
too,
a bad thing.
Especially, everybody knows that follows us is that I'm a huge EQ1 fan. I mean, I could play EverQuest 1 to this day just because of the nostalgic itch that I need to fix, and no modern MMO is fulfilling that itch.
I told you, you set a date, and I'm down for an for a Project 1999 night.
Man, so you heard it. We'll do a P99 stream.
100%. We'll do that.
I've got multiple characters. I think my highest is like a 44 enchanter, but then I've got a druid and some other stuff.
Cool.
Okay.
So taking it back to being able to see things, the mastery system, the survivability. We're in a dungeon, and we've leveled up our mastery. And now one of the things that you have mentioned was when you see a mob, you don't know what level it is. So taking that into account, and also this sneak, hearing, smell. Is there going to be any visual representation to kind of give the character or the PC an idea of what they're about to get into?
Not really. We've talked about the potential for an anatomy-based perception ability, which may give you some insight into the creature's weaknesses. But I don't think we'll ever give you information related to how hard is this mob, what's it going to take it down. That's one thing in EverQuest 1. You had the con system where you could just hit the C key, and if it's blue, you're pretty safe. If it's white, better have a friend with you. Yellow, you're probably going to need 4 people. Red, forget about it unless you've got full group, and for a fact that it's only like 5 levels out beyond your range. But when you were still learning that system, red could mean a lot of things. Red
Yes.
could mean it's 5 levels above me or it's 50 levels above me.
Yep.
And you're not going to know until you hit it, because it's going to hit you back, and then it's like, oh shit, it just triple barraged me for 250 points and I'm dead. You know, and that's like that's a level 50, you know, like you just didn't know. So we want that level of danger to be there, to
Danger,
where
yeah.
you don't know. So, you know, it might be something that you could take on by yourself, because you've skilled up a little bit, you've got some chainmail on, and you know, maybe it is something that you could take on by yourself, but you're not going to know unless
Yeah.
you go out there and hit it.
And
And
that's what I miss. The danger makes the game fun,
yes,
you know. And if you could take that red mob, that gives you bragging rights, you know.
yes,
You worked for that. You have achieved that, and
I
I
think it's
miss that.
also on our FAQ page. I believe the way I explain it is, it's not picking daffodils by the river for your mom. It's going into the mines of Moria with the Fellowship.
Yes.
Like, that's, you know, when you leave the safety of the city walls, this is an adventure. And yes, because this, we get asked this a lot, because people are like, oh, your game sounds so hardcore, it's only going to be for hardcore gamers. That's not necessarily true. If you think about EverQuest as a good example, going back to that game again, anywhere you went,
Sorry,
the
Punk.
direct vicinity outside of any city, regardless of what level you're talking about, it could be Thurgadden, it could be Kelathan, it didn't matter. Everything within the direct vicinity of a city was stuff that solo and duo players could easily handle on their own without needing help from anybody else. But the further you get away from civilization, the more dangerous things become, until you get to the dungeons, which require full groups, and then
Mhm.
raid content beyond that. So
Yeah.
there's lots of content for lots of different players. But if I had to make an estimation, I'd say probably 85% of this game is geared towards the group based, and that could be from 3 players up to 8 players, because we have 8-man groups. But there's also,
Which is
you know,
awesome.
there's a lot of stuff that people can do, you know, on their own, you know, if they've only got 15, 20 minutes of time within the, and we're sort of working on the balance of that in alpha right now. You know, if you go out back of the tavern, there's deer and stuff, which theoretically, yeah, deer aren't supposed to attack you, but it's alpha. So, but you can go out there and kind of take things on your own while you're waiting for a group to form up, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's cool. So I really like that, and you know, just that whole, you know, the placeholder mob experience, you know, being the deer and the boars right now, you know, that like that's super cool, because especially when it's dark, you never know what's going to happen. Not being able to tab through things, it's awesome. I mean, it's just a super immersive experience. So let's tackle the burning question. So you don't know what you're going up against. You don't know if they can see you, smell you, hear you. You roll up in there, you think you're all right, you die. What kind of death mechanics are we looking at? Like, what's the long-term solution that you guys are discussing?
We can't
can't
talk about that quite yet.
Okay.
I can tell you what we have right now.
Sure.
What we have right now is a very early iteration, which is basically what EverQuest had, which is when you die. Well, in our game, technically you don't die. First of all, what happens is, and you can see this, we've got videos up from R11, I think, where you show this in action. And when you go into combat, you can fall in combat. If you fall in combat, somebody from your group can revive you, whether through magical means or mundane means. So potion. Right now we don't have potions, but we do have bandages and a life spell for the healers. But long term, this will be potions in lots of different ways. So you can be revived during combat. Now, when you're revived, you do have some initial, oh, I feel like shit, I just got the shit beat out of me.
Right.
You know, so you've lost your stamina, you're not quite up to full speed, but you know, you're back up and you're back in the fight. Now, as we've seen from prolonged pre-alpha testing, what happens, it's very rare for there to be a party wipe, because in most cases what'll happen is when you have an 8-man party, you've got enough people there
Yes.
to kind of form a defensive circle around the fallen person. Somebody in the party will revive them while you're the attackers. That person gets up, you keep going, maybe somebody else falls, do the same thing. You might have 3 or 4 people fall, but it's a rotational thing where you're constant, as long as you've got the supplies to get them back up, then you can get them back up.
Yeah.
Now,
Will there be
if,
res sickness?
well, that's technically what there is. So what we have right now is battle fatigue and wounds. So when you fall in combat, there is a certain a percentage of that gets applied to your character. Now, if you fall in combat and there's no one around you to revive and you have to release, the wound is significantly more serious.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And also all your gear stays on the tombstone out there in the wild. Now,
Okay.
the wound system is a reduction to your stamina pool, and stamina right now is used for any ability. So basically, excuse me, that's wounds. I'm thinking which one, battle fatigue and wounds. I'm thinking of the wrong one, I think. Anyway, it applies to your hit points as well. So there's wounds and battle fatigue. I'm thinking of the wrong one. Wounds is for your hit points. Battle fatigue is for your stamina. But they both get applied to you when you suffer these traumatic experiences. And basically, you need to rest up to revive from that. And the tavern right now, you go to the tavern, there's a regen on there that'll get rid of battle fatigue. You can get rid of wounds. Also, campfires in the wild will get rid of some things. But we can't talk about the long-term plans for corpse runs. But the only
But
thing
they
I
will
can
exist?
say, well, yes, there will be. Yeah, there is a death penalty, and there will be a type of corpse run for players to make. The caveat to this, without giving anything away, is that there will be an alternative usable in extreme situations where, let's say, I don't have 4 hours or 6 hours to get back to the depths of the dungeon, and I'm willing to sacrifice this thing, whatever, whatever it ends up being. We'll have a unique modern take on it. The way we have it right now is a very early quest style where, if you do actually die, you leave your stuff on a tombstone, which, by the way, has frustrated a ton of people who aren't used to the old school death mechanics. We had a few people who rage quit during R11, which was, I think, 6 months ago or something. We're just publicly got very upset that they just went somewhere where they shouldn't have gone, and then
Right.
they didn't want to group up with other people, and then they got mad because they couldn't solo their way back to their tombstone.
And that's the thing. That's not on you guys. Like that is our game. It's like if you pick up a book off the bookshelf and it's great, but you don't like what happened to one of the main characters, you can't call the writer and be like, fix it. Like it doesn't work like that. So like that's just how the game works. But what I love to hear is that you guys have an alternative. You're thinking
it's
about the
a very
player.
unique take. I don't think anybody else has done exactly what we're doing. We're taking little bits and pieces from like 3 different games that we appreciate the way they've done the death mechanic, and importing that. I don't think it'll be in soon. We're going to start testing that soon. I can't say exactly when, but it should be in the alpha here in the next couple of builds, I would say, theoretically. Don't hold me to that. But it's something we're looking forward to testing pretty soon, because I think it's a distinguishing feature between us and a lot of other MMOs that are currently in development. And it's something we're going to need feedback on from people, because we think it's pretty cool and we think it's pretty unique, and it's harsh without being like, oh, you're fucked because your corpse is in the plane of fear and you got to wait for another raid guild to get
And it's
you
like the
out.
discussion we've been having. They can't be black and white. Go ahead.
It's a very hot topic right now, so it's really
With
good
your
to
guys'
hear.
streams, I know, yeah.
Yeah, it's
It's the third time we're talking about it.
It's exciting to hear, that's all I can say,
Yeah, I guess it's just nice to hear that somebody who's actually in this development space creating these worlds understands that there's a need for that. Like people consider this hardcore mechanic, but it's also something that it's a necessary evil to like instill that fear of dying in the game. But there needs to be something in between for that 13-year-old that has to go to bed at 9 o'clock.
Right, and it's the thing about fire. Your dad tells you fire's hot, but you're never going to believe him until you actually burn your hand.
Right.
And the first time you burn your hand, in my case, I was about 4 years old, and I burned the back of my hand by touching the stove. You learn fire's hot, don't touch fire. And it's like, it's that thing where death sucks, don't die. And also, I think that's something that players have lost along the way, which is the ability. So I lose a lot of respect for people who this sounds bad, but I just got to say this. So when I see people using like a taunt meter that tells them how much threat they're doing or how much damage they're doing, and they've got a taunt meter that tells them when to taunt, there is no skill to that type of
No.
playing in a game. I've always said the most skillful player in the world is the rogue who knows when to turn his effing attack off and walk away from the mob and let the tank regain the aggro.
Yep.
Nobody in today's game space understands
that.
because it's max
miss that.
DPS every game you
Mhm.
play for every class you play. But
Oh
the
my-
best thing you could do as a DPS is turn off the fucking attack, back away, let the tank get aggro, go root a mob over here, or
Yeah.
do something crowd control. Like the one thing I liked in Vanguard was the rogues had a billy club or something. I forget what it was called, but you could literally like stun lock mobs for like 30 seconds. So it was like, oh, I'm doing too much DPS. Fine, drop attack. I'm gonna run over here and beat this guy over the back of the head, and do some crowd control.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think though, because if we have any old school WoW players in our chat, like a lot of this like conversation about modern MMOs stems from the current iteration, probably the last 3 expansions of World of Warcraft. But if people don't remember, like WoW used to be like that. Back before you had those in-depth add-ons, you had these mechanics. Like, sure, maybe you had a threat meter, later on in vanilla, but at the same time, it came down to, if you're a rogue and you're approaching the tank in terms of threat, or you're a mage dropping nukes, you might just not want to cast that nuke for a minute. Just take a second, get some of your mana back, let the tank get some more threat, and then start again. Like, it's okay to stop. Like, the best DPS is the one that's alive.
Yeah, I'm thinking. I don't know if it was early WoW or EverQuest 1, but if you were a mage or a wizard, you'd have to wait like 96% of the mob's health before you would start going ham on it.
Well, that's definitely EverQuest, at least at some point, because
Yeah.
you could sit there and spam your little fire blast things to do 6 points, 6 points, 6 points, 6 points, and when the mob hits about 80%, it's like, okay, ice comet, boom, and you do like 6,000 points of damage. But if you do that early on in the fight, the tank will never get aggro off you,
Right,
so you better
right.
kill it with that one shot.
It's just cool to see that your perception of it is to have like everybody in check, to know their role and their position in the group.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to think, without being arrogant, but I would like to think that my background rating for so many years at the level that I did allows me a little bit of insight into like the group dynamics.
Yes. Absolutely.
Also, having played, it doesn't hurt that I've played a lot of different games over the years,
Right.
to have that sort of, be able to pick kind of little things from each game that I really like. But there is there's a certain percentage, and it's very small, of players who actually play at the upper echelons of gameplay.
Mhm.
And when you're at that tier, there is a different level of play style that the average gamer has no clue about.
Absolutely.
Because it is all about the synergy of when you're raiding with 24, 40, 70 people, not so much the 70, the Zerg raids and EverQuest weren't really strategy based, but especially, I did a lot of I never did WoW raiding, but I did a lot of EQ2 raiding, which is very similar in scope. And you learn a lot from working with a specific set of classes and skills, and players working together to achieve an end goal.
Right.
Whereas I think the first time I realized that the industry had really changed was when I quit raiding, and I took a break for probably like a year and a half, maybe 2 years, and I didn't come back into gaming until Star Wars: The Old Republic launched. And when I came into that game, I was coming into it as a completely different style of gamer. And the first thing, apart from I love this game, it's Star Wars, this is awesome, was I started doing the group encounters with these groups, and I was like, well, there's really no reason. Why did I roll a tank? Like, I'm not taunting. I'm like, there's no real healer. We're all just doing damage to the mobs. And then I've just seen over the past 6 years or whatever, where the evolution of the industry has now just gotten to the point where it is just all DPS.
Yeah,
specs.
there's no holy trinity anymore. Like it's
just DPS.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm really looking forward. That's one of the reasons we went with 8-man parties, groups, is because we want to focus on that synergy between people,
Yeah, that's
as
gonna be
opposed
cool.
to needing a max DPS group. We've said publicly, people who make max DPS groups in our game will just hit a brick wall very quickly.
Yeah.
Because you need crowd control, you need a tank, you need a healer, you need crafters in your group, you need lots of different things to make that synergy work. You can't do that if it's everybody's just trying to go max DPS.
I love hearing you say that you need a crafter in your group, and that makes sense, especially from a tabletop perspective. Like if you're going on a 6-hour adventure deep into a dungeon,
I'll do you one better.
Oh, go ahead.
Think about a Western movie, like John Wayne, old Western movies, and they're on the wagon. Think about the wagon train, and think about the chuck wagon, because you've got all these people who are doing different things. You've got the guys on horses who are out herding the cattle or the horses. The chuck wagon guy is vital to that, and guess what? He's not doing anything adventurous. He's cooking, he's cleaning, he's the medicine man, he's stitching up people's clothing, he's bandaging people's wounds, he's the crafter of the party, and yet without him, they can't survive in the wild without that guy.
I fucking love that. That is sick, man. I love that.
I always love that example. I always love that because I grew up on a farm, so I grew up on a ranch, and grew up reading westerns and watching western movies, and that has always stuck with me. Is when we started development, it's like the chuck wagon guy. That's the guy.
And you never really think about him, but like he's so crucial to that group of people, because without him, like they're not fed, they're not getting their medicines, their textiles aren't getting repaired and stuff. So I mean, okay.
They're too busy out killing shit. He's back at home base, keeping the fire going, cooking beans, and keeping stuff prepared.
Yeah, I like that. All right, so in essence of time, I've got one last question about mechanics in the game, and then we'll get on to some other information that you can give us about whatever. The question that has been asked, and this is something that's talked about a lot in modern versus classic MMOs, is are we going to have instancing?
As the best answer I can give you right now is that the only instancing we're going to have is going to be for the raids related to the Volume 1 storyline. So in terms of if you and your guild are pursuing that primary storyline, then there will be instancing there. The rest of it's going to be open world. Now, I got to take a step back from that and say, we also understand that things like phasing and some limited instancing for the purposes of launch day, for example, when we've got however many thousands of people trying to log into the same zone in the same place at the same time, there has to be some way for us to mitigate that. So there may be some limited version of phasing or instancing. In that regards, we can't confirm or deny anything, but we have to address that kind of scenario. But as far as dungeons go and zones go, no, that's all going to be open. However, we would, one of the things we're doing is like dynamic spawns. So there's not going to be the classic, I'm going to sit here and camp this boss mob. That really won't exist in our game, because the boss mob is going to be spawning in lots of different places. You might camp an area because you need wolf hides, and this is where wolves spawn. So maybe you'll camp the wolves there. But as far as boss mobs and quest mobs go, they're going to be in lots of different places. And also we've got we call them hunters and seekers, but in EverQuest 1 you had like the griffin and common lands that roamed around. He was very high level, and the hill giant, and would just smash newbies if they weren't paying attention. And we have something similar in the sense that we have these different tiers of mobs in every single zone that actively are roaming around, and they don't have set paths. The basic idea is that we don't want players going AFK for prolonged periods of time. We want people to, if you're not gonna log in to play the game, then it's one of those things where if you're gonna go AFK for 30 minutes, you'd be better off just logging out to be safe, because there's no need to do that when you don't have camps.
And that's a valuable resource that you guys have as a small indie company. Like, that's server real estate.
Sure. So, we're doing some things in that arena. So, as far as instancing goes, the only thing that we can confirm is going to be instanced will be the raid content for the progression of the Volume 1 storyline. And that's specifically to avoid the bullshit that comes along with guilds trying to block other guilds from progressing. That kind of shit, as a raider for a long time, one of the things that always drove me bonkers in EverQuest 1 was, in the early days, people respected server rotations. So we had a calendar, everybody was on the calendar, we all took turns. But then, and this has no racial connotations whatsoever, but when the Asian guilds started becoming big on the scenes, they didn't give a shit about our Western calendar system.
Yeah.
They just said, first come, first serve, bitches, and showed up and just started taking everything. And then you got into a situation where, like, trying to camp keys for straw in Brooklyn expansion, and it's like you've got guilds that are permacamping the key spawns for months on end so that no other guild can do it. That kind of stuff is a complete turnoff.
Yeah.
So we will instance the raid content for progression.
Will there be competitive raid type world
Open world
bosses?
stuff, yeah. Open world stuff, sure.
So there will be like a mob that can
Yeah,
be
but that's-
camped and
Sure, but that's not for progression.
Right.
That's just for, hey, this mob drops cool loot. Let's all go compete to see who can kill this mob first.
Good.
The
Okay.
key point is progression. If I'm on a quest, I should not be blocked by another player from progressing on that quest. That's
Right,
the key
absolutely.
point where instancing comes in. That's also one of the reasons we're doing the dynamic spawn, so that everybody's actively hunting down these quest mobs and they don't know where it's at. You got to figure it out.
Okay.
Tracking is very important.
See, and I think that's all good information. Like, I'm a fan of instancing in some systems, but I also remember playing Final Fantasy XI and doing Sky and competing with like 3 other link shells, trying to get that spawn so that way you could move on to the next spawn and the next spawn, and then eventually you can summon the big boss that drops all the good gear. So like I like that the spirit of competition there, but I've also heard the horror stories, like you said, where you have certain guilds that are trying to gate other guilds by preventing them from progressing. So
Yeah, and that to me is PvP, and I don't do PvP for that specific reason. And I'm a Care Bear. I don't like to have my fun ruined by some jerk. Like, I want to be able to play the game and have fun and progress and be challenged, sure, but not be blocked by someone else who thinks it's funny.
Okay,
that they're keeping me from playing.
I have a question. Will there
Sure.
be PvP in Saga?
No.
Oh, what?
FAQ page. That's one of the big things.
yeah,
No
we talked
PvP.
about this, dude. Like where he's
Oh,
like,
I think
"Oh,
you
you're a
did
bunch
tell
of sissies," and you're like, "Yep, whatever." Because
We might do some like city-based arenas or something, but we're not going to be doing any PvP now.
Not
see, but
gonna be a
that's
focus.
reasonable. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I can understand realm versus realm in the sense of like a real world scenario where like medieval France and England, or Scotland and England, so on and so forth. But like in a modern sense, like you got fight clubs, right? Like, I mean, of course we still have wars, but a fight club is reasonable.
Well, I always looked at it and said, when I go over to my buddy's house to play D&D, I don't go over to his house so we can sit on the couch and fight each other. We go sit on the
Fuck
couch
yeah.
to have fun together, to eat popcorn and drink Mountain Dew and
Yes.
role play and have a good 6-hour gaming session. I don't go over there to have animosity and confrontation.
Oh, I hate
I can
that.
do that with the game world. So that's the whole.
Yeah.
I'm not a PvPer, in case you couldn't tell.
And I'm okay with that, man. Like, we've got enough adversity in real life as it is. I want to play a video game to have fun and exit this for a little bit. I don't want to go there and have the same bullshit that I have to deal with where, somebody's always trying to demean me or something. This time they're doing it virtually with the sword in my face. All right, so we're going to be wrapping it up here, guys. We'll be closing out in approximately the next 15, 20 minutes. If you have any final questions...
I'm
Go
sorry. There's a couple of questions, so that's what I was.
There's a whole
getting
bunch
to.
of questions, so I don't know how many of these we want to
Yeah, I
answer.
tried to
Well-
incorporate that into smooth conversation, but there's more I missed.
Right. But Chris, who's a big Saga fan, you were talking about taunt meters and DPS meters, and he asked, any ideas how you guys will stop those type of add-ons from being in the game?
Well, I don't really. I think in the case of Blizzard, don't they just allow those add-ons to be
Yeah.
added?
Mhm.
It's we've had people ask us about add-ons in the past, and my answer has always been, I don't think we anticipate allowing people to use any sort of add-ons.
Okay.
So-
It is what it is.
So there, in the case of Final Fantasy XIV, they know that these types of things exist. It's basically like a data logger that runs in the background, but it
Sure.
is explicitly discouraged because they don't want people having that. You can't join my raid group because you don't do enough DPS. They want people to just play with other people.
I'm fully supportive of that. So I mean, I don't think there's any way we can completely block people from doing stuff on their own end. But as far as add-ons, we don't anticipate allowing add-ons for the game.
Will there be any types of tools that allow a raid guild to look at min-max dynamics and things like that?
I don't see why we would waste time for that kind of stuff.
Hey, I'm
sure,
okay with that because we're just trying to play
I'm
a
sure
game at the
other-
end of the day.
Yeah, I'm sure other people will come up with ways to do that kind of stuff, and they might want to try to incorporate it. But we don't have any plans on doing any of that
Okay.
stuff.
Did you find some other questions, Def, that you wanted to address? I guess I'm behind.
Well, Chris also asked, will there be any open world raid contents besides the storyline stuff?
I believe
I
Tim
think
already addressed that.
Yeah, we just answered
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Okay. My bad.
All good, dude. I know you're trying to catch up on the chat too.
Yeah, I had
There's
a
a whole
bunch.
bunch.
I had a bunch copied and pasted, and I kind of lost some of them, so I do apologize.
All right, I have one last question before I get to some of the burning things that you probably can't answer. So the last question I have is like, will there be servers, or is it planning like are you guys planning on like a
It's
mega
just
server?
gonna be a mega server.
See, I think that's the way it should be. I mean, we've got technology where it's at today; it can support
So
it.
here's the thing, you can even look at a game like ESO, which has millions of players. They have 2 mega servers, one for North America, one for Europe. I don't anticipate us even splitting those two. And also, we don't know what our size is going to be yet, but we would have to hit World of Warcraft numbers before we would have to worry about whether or
Right.
not we're going to be needing more than 1 mega server. But our ideal scenario is a place where Europeans and Americans, not just Americans, I need to say that differently. North American, Oceanic, European, everybody can play, Asian, they can all play in the same space without having to worry about, because there's people who play only at nights that want to group with
Yeah.
the Asian guilds because that's the time zone that they can play. And there's people in Australia who play at the same time as East
Call me
Coast
out.
players in the US. Yeah, so I mean, we'd like to have it all just be one big.
Yeah, and I love that idea because I'm not fond of playing in an environment that is only like these. I'm a native English speaker. I'm a lazy American. I've never learned any other language. Hate me for that all you want, but I couldn't see myself being an overnight. Like I don't go to bed usually till about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't see myself playing in an environment where I just feel completely alienated. Whereas in a mega server type environment, you kind of get that mix of everything, and there's a culturing on both parts. So I think that also makes for a lot more fun because back when I used to play Final Fantasy 11, you had that with Japanese players and French players and things like that, and that was a lot of fun. Like I've got friends all over the world that I met almost 20 years ago just playing video games online.
Yeah, and it keeps the environment active,
Thanks, Minus.
24/7.
Yeah. All right, so burning question time. Can you give us anything in regards, I won't be specific, so if you can give us anything in regards of timelines, what you guys are anticipating in terms of alphas, like are we not going to see this game till 2030? Like what can you give us?
I think the best scenario would be to look at the stage 2 post I put up, I think in February.
Okay.
That pretty much states that our internal goal right now is to have alpha wrapped up by 2021.
Okay.
Now that does not say when in 2021. It just says 2021.
Do you anticipate an extensive beta after that, or so?
I'd say we anticipate at least a 6-month beta.
Okay.
We might only do 3 months. It depends. So we're in a very unique scenario where we bootstrapped for 4.5 years, really 4 years before we got outside investment money that came in.
Mhm.
And I can't get into financials and all that kind of stuff, but
Okay.
that allowed us to bring on contractors. And then we had other investors who wanted to come on board, and we said no. And then we got into our team meeting last year, and we said, well, what's our timeline look like if we don't bring on more people? And the timeline was like, well, we need this. And so I'll give you an example. Somebody had asked this question earlier. I don't remember where it was. They were asked about assets and stuff. We do have Cody. We haven't shared any of his assets publicly, but one of the things we are hiring for is an art director.
Mhm.
www.stormhavenstudios.com/careers. We're hiring an art director, a VFX person, a animator, did I say graphics programmer already? Graphics
yet,
programmer.
but-
So there's 4 or 5 key roles that we're hiring for, because these are things that while we could do them ourselves, it would take us more time than we're willing to put in, or not that we're willing, but more time than we'd like, because we're already dealing with the fact that we're going in 5 years on this, and we all have spouses and significant others and
Right.
etc. who are like, when are you guys gonna launch this thing and actually start making money? Because we don't get paid. The 9
Right.
of us who are on Stormhaven Studios do not make money. We get our paychecks when the game comes out. We do pay our contractors, and we're paying our full-time employees that we're currently hiring to speed us up so that we can do this 2-year alpha, and then potentially, take that as you will, use that as our alpha, and then have a beta window of 3 to 6 months beyond that. But a lot of that is just dependent on how much money we do raise, how quickly that money comes in, also how quickly do we find the people that are talented enough to handle the positions that we have. I get a lot of bad resumes, a lot of bad resumes. So, there's just so many factors into that. So the easiest thing I could say is just stage 2 blog post up on the website has a very kind of rough outline of what I just described, and kind of gives that timeline. Like, we're shooting for a 2-year alpha. 18 to 24 months is what it says.
And
Yeah.
I'm sure we can provide that link in the description.
Yeah, I'll get a bunch of links up in the description once this video, the VOD goes live.
And I'd like to also, if I could,
Go ahead.
expand on that slightly, because we get compared to Pantheon a lot, because I think it's the only other PvE primary MMO in development.
Right.
And you look at them, and they're an advanced scenario because they have veterans on their team who've done this before. They've hired an art director and a VFX person and an animator and a graphics programmer all within I think the last 12 months. And that is, we've all been able to see the visual improvements of their streams over the last 12 months. We're all excited for Pantheon. None of us, it's like we're all highly anticipating that game. And that's a good example to look at, because we're at the stage, we haven't found those people to bring that level of polish to the game yet.
Right.
And that's the next step for us, because we've got all the core mechanics in place and everything else. Now it's a matter of, okay, now we need to actually do those enhancements to the VFX system and the animation system and the shaders and all this other stuff that none of us really have the expertise to handle. And it's it's just
I think you
time
did a
thing.
really good job of describing that in that first episode that you did last week or week before
Oh,
last.
the Diary of an Indie Game Dev.
Yes.
So, yeah, I did
So-
talk about that.
So
didn't I?
again, for those of you who weren't here when I mentioned this before, check out Renfail's YouTube page. He's kind of doing like a mini series on what it's like to be an indie dev for MMOs. And the first video, while it's a bit lengthy, there's a lot of good information there. And one of the things that he mentioned was like getting your engineering done before your visuals is like super important, because anybody can go and slap graphics there, and it's easier to find people who can work on these graphics than it is to find a good engineer that can make the core systems that you need for a game. So when you look at this, if you have seen any of the other videos that have been posted, understand that the reason why it looks almost exactly like Pantheon did like a year and a half ago is because they're using Unity assets.
You can also look at the early Shroud of the Avatar videos, because they also use the same exact assets we're using. It's funny because we can go back. I think we have our very first the very first videos out there somewhere when we logged into alpha for the first time, pre-alpha. It's September, I think 18th or 19th, 2015, and like rubber banding and just lag and graphical issues and everything else. But it was a functional thing. It was working. But like all the torches, our torch posts were exactly the same as the torch posts that you could see in every single Shroud of the Avatar and Pantheon video, because we were all using the exact same torches, the lamp posts, excuse me, in the cities.
It makes sense. It's there. It's good. It's a good way to put a core concept out there to show investors that may be interested in it. So when you're talking about investors and that you potentially turned away money because you weren't really ready for it yet, the alpha access, I hadn't realized had been up for quite a while, and it closed just recently. Do you guys plan on reopening that? Do you plan on doing a Kickstarter or anything like that? I know you talked about your how you feel about Kickstarter, but I'm curious, if that's something that you plan on using.
We actually talked about this internally a while back. So this is going to be a slightly long answer, so I hope we have time. I'll try to keep it relatively
Def,
short.
if you got to go, man, just let us know.
All right, all right. No, I want to hear this. So go ahead.
We may open up the pre-order store again in the future when we need people. Right now, we don't need people. And if and when we do, we'll let people know. However, they will not be the same price. They will not be the same price structure, nor will they have any of the tiers that were associated with our pre-order stores in the beginning, because that was there specifically for the people who believed in us early enough and wanted to get involved when we were nobodies, struggling and figuring all this out. So
Okay.
those all have very special rewards attached to them. So kind of like Kickstarter rewards. So if and when we do open it up again in the future, it would be structured completely different, and the price point would be significantly higher. And it would probably, well, we'll worry about that later.
Okay.
We have discussed in the beginning, we said we didn't want to do crowdfunding. Ironically enough, because somebody mentioned this at the very beginning, we did have an Indiegogo way back in the day. And here's why we had an Indiegogo. Before we had an LLC, when we were first getting going, we had a bunch of friends and family and fans who were like, how can we support you
Okay.
and help you guys out with what you're doing? And we didn't have, PayPal would not allow us at the time to take any sort of pre-orders in because we didn't have an actual legal entity up.
Okay.
So we said, fuck it, we'll put up an Indiegogo with some basic tiers, and we'll have an open-ended, we don't care about how much money we bring in. It's just a way for our friends and family to support us and give us some money. And people say, well, you did crowdfunding. It's like, no, we didn't. We did it because we had no other way to allow people to give us money
That
other
makes
than
sense.
just like donating.
Yeah.
So we've always said we didn't want to do Kickstarter because we don't want to be the type of company that goes to Kickstarter with an idea and says, here, guys, this is what we want to make. Give us money and we'll try to make it happen. And then 2 years later, we say, oh, by the way, guys, that MVP that we promised you on Kickstarter, unfortunately, we can't realize that unless we've got $15 million together. So
Yep.
now it's going to be another 5 years while we go out. So what we're doing is we put in all this hard work up front. We have talked about if and when we ever did a crowdfunding campaign, if and only if we ever did this, it would not be for the development of the game. It would be to support enhanced features, and it would be when we were already, say, 6 months out from launch,
Okay.
and we would be able to say, we already have a launch date, we have a playable product, we're in beta, which is kind of what Project Gorgon did to a lesser degree. But here's it's already a playable product, been up for 4 years, it's in beta. It's the Kickstarter is not for development, it is for enhanced features. Like, do you guys want better spell effects? That's the $40,000 tier. Do you guys want, mounted combat? That's the $75,000 tier. I'm making shit up, by the way. Don't quote me on this.
That's a good way to do it, though. I like that model.
It would not
Same.
be for the development of the game. It would be for enhanced features for a product that's already ready to release and has a launch date. But these are all bridges we'll cross when and if we need to cross them.
So I guess the last question here. I know you said you couldn't talk too much about financials. This is the last question I'm going to ask, and then I'll have you tell us a little bit about where we can find information on Saga. How to word this? Would you guys say that, can you say whether or not you are fully funded to be realized as a complete game?
We've been, if you want to go for that route, we've been fully funded to be realized since the very beginning, because all of us made a commitment.
There you go.
Even if this took us 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
we all made the commitment with our spouses and each other to make this happen.
Perfect.
However, we would much rather it not take 10 years to realize our dream. So that's why we, at the end of the day, was like, all right, let's just do because last year we had publishers coming to us, and at one point we had a multi-million-dollar deal offered, but it had microtransactions tied to it. It's like we're not willing to do microtransactions, so no, we're not going to do that. So we're fine, and even if it was just us doing this, we would eventually launch it. It would just take us a lot longer than we want it to take.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see this in the stage 2 development post. The funding that we're currently raising, and the investor money that we've already brought in, is not for completion of the game. It's to speed up development time, to bring on people who have key skills that we don't currently have and don't want to take the time to learn. I'll give you a perfect example of this, and then we can wrap up.
Mhm.
It is not hard, and I'm saying this with air quotes. I should say this with air quotes. For example, I went out and learned how to do world building in Unity in the course of 3 months by just sitting there and doing tutorials every single for about 6 hours a day.
Right.
I can go out and learn how to do VFX in Unity by sitting there for 6 to 8 hours a day, like a college course, doing tutorials and learning how to do basic VFX in Unity. However, I would much rather not spend my 3 months, because I can spend that 3 months working on the Volume 2 draft, finding people like an art director, hiring people, doing the hiring process, doing interviews like this and all this other stuff that I do. So it's much more efficient for us to find somebody who already has experience as a VFX artist and just pay them a salary,
Right.
engineer. That is a perfect example of where we're at in development right now. We could do it on our own, but it'd be much more efficient if we just hired somebody to do.
Absolutely, and that makes
Right.
sense. You know, Def and I talk about this all the time. Like, I'd love to have people to manage certain aspects of Battle Axe and grow us faster, but right now it's about having those monetary assets to do that. And so right
Sure.
now it's just Def and I trying to do what we do and grow our channel through what little networking
Organic
we can do.
means, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
All right, so tell us a little bit about how people can find out more information about Saga.
The easiest place is just sagaoflucimia.com. If you want to know more information about the studio, you can go to stormhavenstudios.com. Again, if you're looking for a job and you're an art director, VFX person, animator, graphics engineer, etc., there are a variety of jobs available. We also have some intern positions still available as well, but most of what we're looking for at this point is people who have actual industry experience. But you can find that information at stormhavenstudios.com/careers. Everything related to the game, you can find it at sagaoflucimia.com, and we also are on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, although we're not doing a lot of Instagram or YouTube right now. Actually, we're not doing it a lot on social media at all right now because we are in closed alpha and under NDA. The best place to get information on where we're at and what we're doing on a week-to-week basis is going to be to sign up for the forums over on the website. Also, make sure you sign up for the newsletter because we do a blast about once a week. And Discord. Discord's the day-to-day. We're in there every single day.
Absolutely.
Also, aside to this, I think we've kind of earned a reputation over the past 5 years doing this. We have our own gaming community, and we move game to game and play different games over the years. We've done EverQuest 1, EverQuest 2, ESO, Final Fantasy 14.
Sounds very
doing-
familiar.
Yeah, you guys do the same thing. We're actually in the midst of our pre-launch World of Warcraft Classic Guild. We are Alliance side. We play Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. So if you want to join us for that, we're also doing, right now I think we're doing Lord of the Rings Online for the next few months until Classic launches. Just wrapped up Anthem on the PS4. Did like a 2-month stint on Kaladin with the recent TLP for EverQuest 2. So you could get involved with us that way as well, because I like the game, and we're all gamers first and foremost. We're not, none of us had experience in game development. We were just gamers who wanted to do this.
That's
so
awesome.
That's our first passion. So if you just want to get involved with us, that's the easiest way. But yeah, Discord for day-to-day, social media for once in a while, forums for the weekly stuff, and the newsletter for the super duper fun details once a week.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to put that information in the VOD. So if you guys want URLs for that to make it easier, you can. If you guys haven't already, be sure to click that subscribe button and hit that bell notification icon if you want to be notified. You got more?
Yeah, I forgot. Also, yeah, don't forget about the novel.
Right. That's super important.
That up.
Shit. Go ahead.
Yeah, don't forget, if you go to the website, it's on Amazon. So it's called Echoes of the Past. It's book 1 of the Saga of Lucimia. If you're a lore junkie and you want to know more about the world that's being built here, you can also find it on our website. I think there's a store link or something that takes you to links to the Amazon page. But I forgot to mention the novel, and somebody brought it up in YouTube. So
yeah, that's super important because we talked a lot about that lore, where the inspiration comes from. And I haven't got to finish the book, but so far it reads very, I don't know how to say it, very good. I'm enjoying it, and it's very descriptive. I almost feel, I don't know if you'll be insulted by this or not, I almost feel it's almost Tolkien-esque in terms of how it reads. So
that's one way to look at it. My major source for my writing style, early stuff was like Roger Zelazny, playing around with first person. But when I got into third person, I really appreciate the Robert Jordan mentality.
Mhm.
However, Robert Jordan goes overboard with descriptions sometimes. So I kind of tried to find a balance between like, really, I did try to find a balance between like Raymond Feist, Tad Williams, and Robert Jordan.
Okay.
We're like looking at my fantasy. Those are like some of the better series that I enjoyed. I mean, there's way more. I'm doing Dave Duncan. I'm doing the Seven Sword series by Dave Duncan right now. But I mean, I like all fantasy. Those would be kind of what I was going.
Awesome. So yeah, be sure to check that out. I'll put a link to that in the description as well. It's a shame I no longer have an affiliate account because I could help you out there too. But yeah, so yeah, check out those when we get those links posted. Also check us out on social media. We're Battle Axe Theater on Facebook and Twitter. If you could follow us there, and it'll help you guys keep like in contact with us and know when things are going on. We talked to Tim a little bit about this, and you've reassured us that you're going to be back at some point, right?
Whatever you guys want. I'm available daily.
All right, perfect.
Hell
This is
yeah.
my day job, so.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up. Thanks so much, Tim, for joining us tonight. Thanks, Def, for sticking
Thanks
around.
for tuning in.
All right,
Yeah,
guys.
yeah.
Appreciate everyone coming by, and we will see y'all next week. See ya.
Thank you guys.